The Gospel of Matthew 27, verse 19 says, "While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent to him, saying, 'Have nothing to do with that just man, for I have suffered many things today in a dream because of him.'" As Pontius Pilate was sitting on his judgment seat, inquiring about Jesus, his wife sent him an urgent message. She had a dream from God, which showed her that Jesus was an innocent man, a just man, and she suffered so much in this dream that she was deeply convinced that her husband, Pontius Pilate, should set him free. So here we see God trying to reach Pilate's wife in a dream, and then she is trying to reach her husband in time to stop him from making the biggest mistake of his life. Here is the question. If it was God's will that Jesus should be crucified, why would God give Pilate's wife a dream with a message for her husband to release Jesus, to set him free? Let's read the same passage, Matthew 27, 19 to 24, but further down. "While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent to him, saying, 'Have nothing to do with that just man, for I have suffered many things today in a dream because of him.' But the chief priests and elders persuaded the multitudes that they should ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor answered and said to them, 'Which of the two do you want me to release to you?' They said, 'Barabbas.' Pilate said to them, 'What then shall I do with Jesus, who is called Christ?' They all said to him, 'Let him be crucified.' Then the government said, 'Why? What evil has he done?' But they cried out all the more, saying, 'Let him be crucified.' When Pilate saw that he could not prevail at all, but rather that a tumult was rising, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, 'I am innocent of the blood of this just person. You see to it.' I am innocent, well, of the blood of this just person. Here, Pilate is repeating the words of his wife, which she received from God in a dream. Have nothing to do with that just man. Pilate's wife was convinced through the message she received from God that Jesus was a just man. As Pilate was considering the words of his wife, and as he conversed with Jesus, he also became convinced that Jesus was an innocent and just man. And the message rang in his ears, in his mind, in his heart, in his conscience. Have nothing to do with that just man. What we don't find here is a message from God saying to Pilate, "Oh, wonderful, Pontius Pilate, my friend, you are doing my will by crucifying Jesus, so thank you so much for that." No, not at all. Quite the opposite. What we find is a message from God saying to Pilate, do not crucify Jesus. Do not crucify Jesus. But the pressure kicked in. There was a pressure from the religious institution and its leaders, who put pressure also on the population, Matthew 27:20. But the chief priests and elders persuaded the multitudes that they should ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. There was a pressure from the political institution. So there's pressure from the religious institution, but there's also pressure from the political institution to which Pilate belonged. The Gospel of John 19:12. From then on, Pilate sought to release him, but the Jews cried out, saying, "If you let this man go, you are not Caesar's friend. Whoever makes himself a king speaks against Caesar." So for one specific moment during Christ's trial, Pilate tried to do everything he could to release Jesus. Well, almost everything. And he almost did. He almost made the right decision. He almost listened to his wife. He almost listened to the message from God. Almost. But when the cunning religious leaders saw Pilate's face and realized what was happening with Pilate, they pushed him even harder against the wall, right into the corner, saying, "If you release him, you're not Caesar's friend." When Pilate heard this, they mentioned the name of his boss, Caesar. Suddenly, he was overcome by panic, facing the prospect of severe loss and experiencing suddenly the fear of loss, which he could not handle. The fear of loss of his position, all kinds of things, and all the privileges tied to his position, and all sorts of things. So, because of the pressure from the religious institution and its leaders, who also brought upon him the pressure of his own political institution, led by Caesar, Pilate made a decision which he knew was wrong. He was fully convinced and convicted and conscious of the fact that Jesus was just an innocent man and that he should release him. But because of pressure, he consciously chose to do otherwise. And at some point, you and I may find ourselves, or may have found ourselves, in this life in such pressure situations where we knew or we know what is the right thing to do, but because of the pressure, peer pressure, pressure from the government, pressure from the religious institution, because of fear of loss, we find ourselves contemplating the possibility of not doing the right thing. And in these pressure moments, each one of us has a personal responsibility to make a decision. What if Pontius Pilate listened to God's voice? What if he made a different decision? What would have happened if he released Jesus? That is the question. If Pilate released Jesus and sent him out of the praetorium, out of the compound guarded by the Roman soldiers, I don't see how Jesus would have made it out there alive. I don't see how that would happen. The religious leaders and the crowd that was overcome by mass hysteria. They would surely go after Christ and make sure that he gets what he deserves. Of course, behind the scenes, someone else was really pulling the strings. Somewhere in the background, deep in the dark, the prince of this world, Satan, was doing his business. He was the prince of darkness, and this was the hour of darkness. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 22, verses 52 and 53. Then Jesus said to the chief priests, captains of the temple, and the elders who had come to him, "Have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs? When I was with you daily in the temple, you did not try to seize me. But this is your hour and the power of darkness." By saying this is the hour of darkness, Christ was implying that this entire farce trial was overseen and controlled by Satan, the prince of darkness. By the time Pilate asked, "Do you want me to release Jesus or Barabbas?" the crowd was fully under Satan's control, overcome by mass hysteria. And if Pilate released Jesus, again, I don't see how Jesus would make it out of there alive. Perhaps the crowd would have stoned him there and then. Or perhaps they would drag him back into the chamber of the high priest and beat him to death. Or perhaps they would drag him towards the temple and kill him there, just like the righteous Zechariah was killed between the temple and the altar, as Jesus said. In any case, the mode of death, the type of death is not important. What does it matter? What matters was that he was just and innocent, and no matter which way he died, he did not deserve it. Some believe that there is only one fixed future which is controlled and maintained by God, and that there is only one predetermined or set future that can happen. But if this is the case, why would God send a message to Pilate telling him to release Jesus? God says what he says, not because he controls the future, but because somehow he sees the future, or more correctly, the futures, the plural, the futures. Clearly, there is more than one future possible here. There are at least two possible futures, releasing Jesus or crucifying Jesus. And it is a very fine, yet very distinct line between God seeing the future and God forcing or controlling the future. And perhaps that is why the apocalyptic prophecies of the Bible are highly symbolic and wrapped in mystery. It is because God does not want to override our choices. If God gave us a detailed account of the future, we would have no choice. It's detailed and clear. That's what's going to happen, and that's it. We would have no choice but to abide in the clearly outlined and predetermined future. But that's not what we find here. Pilate has a choice of the two futures, either to release Jesus or to crucify Jesus. And unless you and I can genuinely make our own choices, this entire life is a farce and a charade and pretense. Charade and pretense. If this is the case, then freedom that Christ spoke about is an illusion. And if freedom is an illusion, then love must be an illusion also. There can be no love without freedom, as love is not so much about how we feel, but it is more about the choices we make, even despite how we may feel. Choices regarding the people around us. And again, some people say God is in control. It is an interesting saying, which you will not find anywhere in the Bible. The word control does not reflect God's nature, but it points to a very different character. Satan is the one who uses control, while God's mode of operation is freedom. Freedom and love and respect. Satan seeks to control humans in various ways. He does it directly, through demonic possession, where somehow the demons have the complete control of the entire human body. He does it perhaps indirectly or less directly through addictions and other similar phenomena, where the demons have a partial, limited control of the body's biochemistry and biochemical systems. And these two ways of controlling people are visible, and we can point fingers at people in such situations, because these things are clearly observable. For Jesus, neither of these two was problematic. He was able to help people with these kind of visible problems, whether it was a demonic possession or something lesser that does not exhibit such extreme control over humans. Jesus was able to set these people free. That was his mission, to proclaim liberty to the captives and to set the oppressed free. The Gospel of Luke 4:18 and 19. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. Similarly, Apostle Paul says, 2 Corinthians 3:17, now the Lord is Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. The Spirit of the Lord brings liberty, and you cannot have both liberty and control. These two are incompatible and unable to peacefully coexist, and are mutually exclusive. So Satan controls some people in a visible manner, like demon possession or addictions or other similar phenomena. But there is another way Satan seeks to control people. And this is the most subtle, sinister, and insidious control, because this one is invisible. And unlike the visible manifestation of Satan's work, that takes full or partial control of the body or our biochemistry, this type of Satan's work does not control biochemistry, but something much deeper, the human spirit. Some people are controlled by Satan through pride, envy, jealousy, covetousness, resentment. All these are invisible and are not manifested through the biochemical control of the body, but are seated in the darkest and the deepest chambers of the human heart, stemming from the human spirit. This manner of satanic control was very problematic for Jesus, because he could do very little to help people with such conditions. When the very center of the human being, the human spirit, is chained, sometimes people are not even aware that there is a problem. And consequently, these people will not look for help or for healing or for salvation or for liberation, because there's nothing to be liberated from. Sometimes there is blindness to it. Or sometimes there is a refusal to acknowledge or accept that there is a problem. Jesus came to save the sinners, and at the same time, he was very unsuccessful when trying to save those who saw themselves as righteous. While the demonic forces of evil were using various modes of control to chain people physically and spiritually, Jesus never used control. He approached people in a completely opposite manner, proclaiming freedom and liberty from the control of the powers of darkness. So we have two key words here: control and freedom. One describes Satan, while the other describes Christ. While Satan enslaves, Christ liberates. And both of them are still doing their work even today. Let's go back to Pontius Pilate. John chapter 19, verses 10 and 11. Then Pilate said to him, "Are you not speaking to me? Do you not know that I have power to crucify you and power to release you?" Jesus answered, "You could have no power at all against me unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, the one who delivered me to you has the greater sin." Pilate said to Jesus, "Don't you know that I have the authority to condemn you or release you?" Jesus says, "You would have no authority unless it was allowed by the higher power from above." If you remember, just like Jesus said in the Garden of Gethsemane, "I am," and everyone fell to the ground, all the people wanted to arrest him. So he could have said again, "I am," to Pilate, and then healed, and all of his soldiers, the crowd would fall to the ground also. But while Christ had the ability to do that, he made a different choice. And this is how he explained it to Pilate. John chapter 18, verse 36, Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now, my kingdom is not from here. This world and its kingdoms use force to control people. But that is not the way of my kingdom. That is not me. That is not God, Jesus says. And because of who I am, because of that, because of who I am, now I will suffer. But this is still my choice. And you also have a choice, Pilate. I am offering you the truth and giving you the freedom to choose it. Then Pilate says, what is truth? Pilate was unaware of Christ saying, only the truth can set you free. And even if he was aware of this saying, it would not do him any good, because he did not see himself as someone who needs to be set free. He saw himself as being in full control, while in reality, Satan was pulling various strings in the background, and Satan was indirectly controlling Pilate. Jesus is not the king of this world, as his kingdom is not of this world. And there is a different prince or ruler who rules this world. Pilate told Jesus, don't you know that I have the authority to set you free? And this was true in strictly human, earthly, and material terms. But the reality was that it was actually Jesus who had the authority to set Pilate free from satanic control. And Jesus offered it to Pilate in some way or shape or form. Indirectly, he gave him this choice to know the truth, to get to know him who is called the truth. But Pilate rejected this offer. And if you and I, at some point in life, happen to find ourselves in a similar situation in principle, we will have to make a choice, whether to accept Christ's offer to us or to crucify Christ anew, yet again. Each one of us, at some point in life, has to make a choice, whether we accept God or we crucify and kill God by rejecting him and by rejecting his offer of liberation. Only through Christ can we have freedom. He is called the truth, and only the truth can set us free. It is a massive gift he is offering to all of us, to liberate us from control which is enforced by the kingdoms of this world, and to take us into the freedom of the life eternal in his kingdom.